Morning, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about doubts and faith, belief. And I'm going to start today by reading from John chapter 20, verses 1 through 31. Early in the morning of that first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. She ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." Peter and the other disciple left to go to the tomb. They were running together, but the other disciple ran faster than Peter and was the first to arrive. Bending down to take a look, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he didn't go in. Following him, Simon Peter entered the tomb and saw the linen cloths lying there. He also saw the face cloth that had been on Jesus' head. It wasn't with the other clothes, but was folded up in its own place. Then the other disciple, the one who arrived at the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They didn't yet understand the scripture that Jesus must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to the place where they were staying. Mary stood outside near the tomb crying. As she cried, she bent down to look into the tomb. She saw two angels dressed in white, seated where the body of Jesus had been, and one at the head and one at the foot. The angels asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" She replied, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they've put him." As soon as she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I haven't yet gone up to my Father. Go to my brothers and sisters and tell them, I am going up to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene left and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord." And she told them what she had seen. It was still the first day of the week. That evening, while the disciples were behind closed doors because they were afraid of the Jewish authorities, Jesus came and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his sides. When the disciples saw the Lord, they were filled with joy. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you." Then he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they are forgiven. If you don't forgive them, they aren't forgiven." Thomas, one of the 12, wasn't with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he replied, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger in the wounds left by the nails, and put my hand into his side, I won't believe." After 8 days, his disciples were again in a house, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus entered and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, look at my hands. Put your hand into my sides. No more disbelief, believe." Thomas responded to Jesus, "My Lord and God." Jesus replied, "Do you believe because you see me? Happy are those who don't see and yet believe." Then Jesus did many other miraculous signs in his disciples' presence, signs that aren't recorded in this scroll. But these things are written so that you will believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that believing, you will live in his name. So how do you think the disciples felt when they heard the story of Jesus' resurrection? First, Mary comes out and said, he's alive. What do you think how they might have felt, or what they might have wondered about? They might have wondered, like, wait, is this really possible? Is this really true? This can't actually happen. So they might have been sort of confused at first. And Thomas in particular, he wasn't there when Jesus first came to the other disciples. And to believe that Jesus was alive in a new way, he wanted to actually see it with his own eyes, right? Although Jesus says to him, "Happy are those who don't see and yet believe." But Thomas doubted. He had to see with his own eyes what had happened. And it's natural to have doubts. I mean, how might you have felt if you were in Thomas's situation and something miraculous occurs that you just think can't happen, is too good to be true? You might not believe it at first because it just doesn't make sense. You don't understand. You don't understand something. It makes it harder to believe it. And it can be very hard to see miracles in particular. They're happening all the time around us. Miracles are always occurring, but we don't always see them because it's not always easy to believe that miracles are occurring. So you think about a time when you might have had some doubts, whether maybe it was doubts about how you might do in a test or how you might perform during a game, or maybe times when you've doubted in God and doubted your own faith. But we all have times when we feel untethered and we aren't really sure what to think. And this can be brought on by stress or by grief if you've lost someone you love, or sometimes when things just aren't going your way. So it's totally normal and we all have doubts. But as Jesus said, happy are those who don't see and yet believe. And that's what faith is all about. It's about believing, even if you can't see physical proof. Now I'm going to read a little bit. So we're going to pretend we're going to put ourselves in the tomb where Jesus was buried. And I want you to put yourselves, I'm going to put you in the place of Simon Peter and John and Mary to get their perspectives on what might have happened, this miracle that had occurred. Right. Turn it around so it's not sideways. So first, here's Simon Peter's perspective. Mary told us someone had taken away Jesus's body, so John and I rushed to the tomb. John got there first. I bent down and looked in the tomb. Then I went inside. I saw strips of cloth they had used to wrap up Jesus's body and the piece of cloth that had been used to cover his face. It was rolled up over by itself in the corner. I just stood there feeling numb all over. So Mom, he saw this and he didn't know what to think, confused and didn't understand what was happening. So now, Mary Magdalene. I went to the tomb very early in the morning. The stone had been rolled away from the entrance to the tomb. I looked and saw that someone had taken Jesus's body. Right away, I ran back and told John and Simon Peter. They ran ahead of me and got back to the tomb before I did. I walked more slowly. I was crying. I stood for a long time outside the tomb. Finally, I bent down and looked inside. I saw two figures shimmering with white light sitting where Jesus's body had been. Then I heard a voice behind me saying, "Why are you crying?" I respond, "They have taken away my Lord's body and I don't know where they have put him," I said. Then I turned around. There was a man standing there. I thought it must be the gardener. And he said again, "Why are you crying? If you have taken his body, please tell me where you have put him," I cried in desperation. The man said, "Mary." Just like that. Just my name. Very simple. I knew at once it was Jesus. I rushed to hug him, but he said, "Don't hold on to me. I'm going to my Father, to God. He told me to tell you what he had said, so here I am telling you. You may not believe me, but that's what happened." And finally, here is the story from John's perspective. I only looked inside the tomb. Then when Peter told me what he saw, I went inside too. I saw the cloth lying there, and it was at that moment that I felt something change inside me. That was the moment I believed he truly was alive again. I don't know how or what changed, but looking at that cloth, I believed. We came right back out to find the rest of you. So Simon Peter and John and Mary Magdalene each had different sort of reactions to Jesus's resurrection. So Simon Peter, he just didn't understand what was going on. He was in shock. He was just confused about it. And Mary Magdalene, she wasn't sure at first, but it was when she heard her name spoken by Jesus that she realized it was him, and realized to a certain extent what had happened. And then think about what John said. So he says, he was, all of a sudden, he believed, and he was truly alive again, and something had changed within him. And that's belief, and that's faith. And think about, I want you to think of a moment that you've had suddenly some inexplicable, something happens, or a moment when something changes suddenly inside of you. And you have all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you might have a certain understanding about something, or have a certain realization, or have all of a sudden maybe a moment when you really feel your faith, a moment when you could feel God there, or a moment when you just have a connection suddenly to the world around you. I know for me, this often happens the most when I'm out in nature and out in the wilderness. So I want you to think of such a moment where you just feel a little bit of, it doesn't have to be anything too dramatic, but sometimes when you just felt close to God, or had a sudden change of heart or something, or all of a sudden just felt like you understood something deep inside you. And I want you to share it with someone. So it can be someone you're watching this video with, or someone else in your household, or a friend, or find someone to share that moment with, and ask them about if they have ever had such a moment. So that's it for today. Be kind to yourselves, and if you can, be kind to someone else as well. I'll see you next time.